Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Jeannie. Good morning, Hemant, Anila, Niranjan, Stephen. Good morning. Okay, so very small standard from today's discussion perspective. Again, a disclosure standard only. So a little bit of accounting and a lot of information that needs to be given. Almost zero accounting, actually. It's just a disclosure. And something that you have already studied in your accounting standards under AS 17 that would go under segment reporting by the name of segment reporting. So here it is Ind AS 108 operating segments that goes by the name of that was preceded by IFRS 8. Okay, I mean that is sourced from IFRS 8. Okay, all right. So now we just just a minute. Okay, yeah. So coming to Ind AS 108, we did have a standard AS 17 that dealt with segment reporting. So what are you aware about segment reporting? What do you mean by segment reporting? Why it is crucial? Why it is critical? Yeah. See, from accounting perspective, we have done all the preparation of the financial statements, balance sheet, cash flow, profit and loss. All these things are taken care of when we do the financial statements. But the way the business views the way the management views the business is not on a totality basis. See, on a totality basis, you have some revenue, you have some profits, you have some expenses. So that is a totality basis. But what happens is there may be entities with multiple business units. There may be entities with multiple businesses. Okay. Some businesses may be performing exceedingly well. Some businesses may not be performing well. You need to view the allocation of resources to each of these businesses. You need to view the cost of each of these businesses, and your decisions will be dependent each business wise. You are not going to decide on an overall basis whether you really need to whether you really need to uh, appoint resources or not. You will ultimately drill down to each of these businesses or what we call as segments. So the management's eyes are always on these individual segments. Now, when we talk about uh, segment reporting, or in this case, the name is operating segments, the disclosures here are of particular interest to investors, analysts, because what they view is not the overall numbers. They want to see which business is performing, which business is underperforming, and what is the outlook of these businesses in the future. So in Reliance, for example, you have entities like the refineries business, you have the telecom business, you have Reliance Retail, you have Reliance Trends, you have Reliance Smart, that is all the groceries. So each of these comprise of distinct operating segments. Okay, if you look at something like Mahindra, Mahindra is having Tech Mahindra, for example, the IT system, the IT operations. It is also having Club Mahindra, that is your holiday and hospitality. It is also having Mahindra and Mahindra vehicles. So there also you have one more segment that is coming in. So ultimately, the buildup of the P&L is a bottoms-up approach. It is each of these segments put together that give you the total profit and loss. So what becomes critical for analysts is the revenue in each of these segments, the cost in each of these segments. Now, my question to you is, do you think that the costs in each of these segments will be uniform, or will they depend on the nature of each of these businesses?
Nature of business, sir.
It will depend on the nature of business. It will depend on the nature of each of these businesses. And therefore, you cannot go on a totality basis and say that my future is going to look like this. No, you have to go and drill down to at least what the management views as separate segments. And then you will have to arrive at a conclusion as to how the business will pan out in the near future. Okay. See, investors are not very much interested in the past as they are interested in the future. They want to see what is your trends in the past and how are you forecasting the future. So those trends are always going to move business wise. They will never move on an entity level basis. Okay. So now, how do I identify segments? How do I identify the segments is the major question that we now come into. Yes. If you remember AS17, what was the approach? The approach was a risk and rewards approach. The approach was a risk and rewards approach. If products are having different risks and rewards, then they will be treated as different segments. But if they have same risks and rewards, they will be regarded as a single segment. They will be regarded as a single segment. So for example, if I look at a vehicles business, let us assume you have a company which is the one you have a company like Hyundai, for example. Okay. I haven't seen the annual financials, but I'm just discussing it off track. Okay. Hyundai is into the automobile segment. So the risks and rewards as perceived by the accountant will be that whether I sell an i10, whether I sell an i20, whether I sell a Verna or an Elantra, or whether I sell Creta or Alcazar or whatever be the vehicles, ultimately it is the automobile industry. And because it is the automobile industry, I have only one segment because ultimately what I'm going to deal with is only the automobiles, only one set of vehicles, and therefore I will do only the segmentation based on automobiles. Okay. He may go one step further and say, I have revenue by sale of vehicles. And okay, so we're talking from Hyundai's perspective. So essentially, your servicing is not going to come because servicing is drilled down to the showrooms. Okay, so he will say that, boss, this is the only category of business that I do. That is, I manufacture and sell vehicles. That's it. But if I look at the reality today, all of us are aware of the trends. SUVs are coming more and more into the limelight. The era of sedans like Verna or Elantra is going back, is taking a back seat. People are either preferring the new entrants, the people who are buying a vehicle for the first time. They would typically be the ones who would opt for a hatchback, something like an i10 or an Eon or a Santro or i20 or whatever it is. So that is one distinct categorization. And the SUV becomes one distinct categorization. So if I talk about a company like Hyundai, I will be having entry segment. In your entry segment, you will have cars like Eon, Santro, i10. Then mid-range hatchbacks. You have the i20 that is currently there. i20 and i20 active. Okay. Then we move on to the next one, that is sedans. In your sedans, you have the Verna, you have the Elantra, and then you have the SUVs. Now, when I talk about SUVs, typically this will include vehicles like Creta, Alcazar, and once upon a time there was a vehicle called Santa Fe, which was there by Hyundai. Now it's no longer there. Okay, but for our examples, we can discuss. Now, if I go by the trends in the market, okay, this segment is definitely not as fast growing as SUVs, definitely pricier than entry segments, as well as the mid-range hatchbacks. Though this sedan segment is a family car, new families will prefer to go for the entry or the mid-range hatchbacks, and families which are in the what you can say, they have a habit of buying, they are no longer into the entry segments, they are well established families, they would prefer something like your SUVs. So what the business views is, my sedans is probably on a downward trend, my SUVs are seeing an upward trend, my entry segment and mid-range, I have to ensure I do my allocation of resources to ensure that people get attracted to this. See, ultimately, the profits I can generate from my entry segments and mid-range hatchbacks can go to some extent can be diverted to some extent towards the SUV segments also. But what is more important is these entry segment and mid-range hatchback customers in due course will automatically graduate to my SUVs. And therefore, it is critical for me to maintain the price point for the entry segment and mid-range hatchbacks. At the same time, considering that the premium customers go for the SUVs, I have to balance the value that I'm adding there as well. Okay. So all these things will be decided by who? By the chief operating decision maker, a new term that is introduced in Ind AS 108. What Ind AS 108 does is, it is shifting your focus. It is shifting your focus. Your focus is getting shifted from an accountant's perspective. It is getting shifted from an accountant's perspective. Accountant क्या बोलता था? Accountant was saying, sir, Eon, Santro, i10, i20, Verna, Creta, all these are vehicles. Vehicles are all coming under automobile industry. So everything is under one segment. So कर दो, there is no segment reporting. We will disclose everything as one. So हमें segment reporting, we will state that we have not identified any different segments. Therefore, disclosures under AS 17 is not applicable. Okay, that would be your disclosure. That would be your activity under AS 17. But now when I come to Ind AS 108, Ind AS 108 tells, wait, this is not something that an accountant sitting in the back office can decide. There has to be a connectedness between the business, the way the management views the business, and the way the numbers are being projected. So what Ind AS 108 does is, it introduces something known as a CODM. It introduces something known as a CODM. In short for Chief Operating Decision Maker. Chief Operating Decision Maker. A Chief Operating Decision Maker views the results very differently from the way an accountant views it. So we have to understand and appreciate. Tomorrow, some of you may go into the industry. So when you go into the industry, the business heads will definitely not view the businesses or will definitely not view the results the way accountants do, the way financial reporting people do. Financial reporting people are concerned more with the accounting standards, the way you have to do things. They are more meticulous on the reporting front. But the business unit guys are more, they have their ears to the ground. They want to see how the numbers are stacked up based on the markets that they cater to, based on the markets that they cater to. So a business unit guy will not look at automobile as one segment. Rather, they will do a drill down into each of these four segments. You go to a business unit guy with your consolidated P&L and he will say, I don't want this. I want to see how is my revenue in entry segment, how is my revenue in mid-range, how is my revenues in SUVs, come out with a trend line of what has happened in the past, give me the market study for what will happen in the future, map this, look at how our competitors are performing in the similar segments, and then come out with this particular set of data so we can outline our strategy for the future as to What area should I focus on? If any particular segment is underperforming, sedans, for example, then over the next 5 or 10 years, do I need to phase out the sedan segment, or do I improve, add any values? Do I do any modifications, any cost cutting to make the sedan segment look better or perform better than it currently is performing? And how is my competitor performing? So overall, they need an overall industry outlook at each of these segments. And it is the CODM who has the best knowledge of the segments, who has the best knowledge of the segments. Okay. So segments can be obviously product wise. Segments can also be geography wise. Segments can also be geography wise. Okay. So the basic geography is domestic and exports. In exports also, you may probably look into various regions, okay, like Middle East, for example, United States market, Europe, for example. Okay. So you could decide on each of these segments independently, and then probably you could make your decision. Probably you could make your decision. Okay. So based on this, your chief operating decision maker, is that designation which decides on the operations. This individual or this group of persons, they take decisions on operations. They decide what areas will I focus, what areas will I grow in the future, where should I defocus, how should I allocate my resources. All these decisions are taken by the chief operating decision maker. And what Ind AS 108 does is, it wants to disclose the results. It wants to disclose the results through the lens of the chief operating decision maker. Through the lens of the chief operating decision maker. See, ultimately, the reader of financial statements should have that connectedness with the management's perception of the business. Otherwise, this just becomes an annual report. This just becomes an annual report for the purposes of reporting. For the purposes of reporting, you put a stamp, seal, and done. Your compliance for a particular year is done. But that is not the case. Ind AS 108 has deeper implications. Ind AS 108 intends to give insights to the readers of financial statements that, look, you have to view the business in a particular manner. And once you are able to communicate that in your financial statements, then those financial statements will provide much greater value than what they would have been if everything went in as a single segment. Are we able to understand the introduction? Yes? Sure? Any doubts? Yes. Okay. So now coming back to the content. So what is the core principle of Ind AS 108? What is the core principle of Ind AS 108? An entity shall disclose information to enable users of its financial statements to evaluate the nature and financial effects of the business activities in which it engages and the economic environments in which it operates. Okay. So we have numerous such businesses where we operate. We have numerous customers we cater to. We have numerous geographical segments we cater to. So all these things have to be disclosed. So it intends to enable the users to evaluate the nature and financial effects of the business activities in which it engages and the economic environments in which it operates. Judgment is required for applying Ind AS 108. The management should consider the core principle for the purposes of segment disclosure rather than relying on a set of rules as was done under AS 17. AS 17, risk and reward approach. Gaadi bech rahe ho, there is only one set of risks and rewards. There is only one segment. Now it no longer works. The entity should provide information used by the management entity should provide information used by the management, not by the accountant, used by the management, that will allow the users to understand the entity's main activities, the location of those activities, and the performance of those activities. It allows users of the financial statements to review the information from the eyes of the management rather than the risk and reward approach, thus enhancing a user's ability to predict actions or reactions of management that can significantly affect an enterprise's prospects for future cash flows. So for investors, this becomes critical. Predictability is now the most fundamental skill that is expected from finance professionals. We should be in a position to enhance predictability of the numbers. Reporting what you people are doing is a skill set, no doubt, but ultimately it belongs to the past. How are we making our numbers suitable for the management to predict? That is one of the key skill sets that is required now. And with the advent of artificial intelligence, okay, with the advent of so much of information, the internet, okay, predictability is the most important thing that we are expected to bring to the table. You are expected to predict how the P&L looks like in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months. How is your cash flow position? So all these factors are something that we need to build so that the management can take corrective actions if you foresee any adverse situation in the future. Okay. After all this also, you can come out with adversities like COVID-19, for which nobody was prepared, nobody foresaw it. Nobody even had the slightest thought as to how big this situation could be. Okay. COVID has created opportunities. COVID has wiped out businesses also. Both things are there. Okay. So now coming to the next one, scope of Ind AS 108. It is applicable to companies to which Ind AS applies, obviously. If the company is not required to present consolidated financial statements, then it is mandatory to present in your separate financial statements. Consolidated, obviously, it is not applicable. Okay. But if you are required to present consolidated financial statements, then it is mandatory that we present this information in the consolidated financial statements. But in the separate financial statements, it is only voluntary. It is only voluntary. Because ultimately in the consolidation, we are sitting today looking at the group's results. So there, if the disclosure is there in the separate financial statements, you can keep it voluntary. Voluntary disclosure. Suppose now you do a voluntary disclosure, you cannot name it as segment information. If you name it as segment information, it must be in line with Ind AS 108. Okay, you can give a heading like information about businesses, and then you can do it in any manner that you want. But if you use the words segment information, then that word segment information should be compliant with Ind AS 108. Okay. So even if you go for a voluntary disclosure, it's not required to do Ind AS 108. You want to do something to enhance the reader's ability of interpretation of your numbers, then please name it differently. अगर आपने नाम दिया segment information, then you have to ensure you comply with Ind AS 108. Okay. All right, so that is only disclosed here. In case of separate financial statements where presentation of segment information is optional, in case the entity decides to present it and title the same as segment information, the information so presented must be in accordance with Ind AS 108. Is it okay? Yes. So let us move ahead. So Ind AS 108 is a four-step method, is a four-step mechanism. First one is identification of the chief operating decision maker. Identification of the chief operating decision maker. The second one is identifying the operating segment. The third is determining the reportable segment. And the fourth step is disclosures as per Ind AS 108. So ultimately, the build-up happens as first you identify who is the CODM. The CODM's lens will help us identify the operating segments. Not necessary that all operating segments should be reported. There is some materiality criteria also which is laid down. So then from the operating segments, we look at the reportable segments. And based on the reportable segments identified, we go ahead to give the disclosures. We go ahead to give the disclosures. What we follow currently is a management approach instead of a risk-reward approach under AS 70. So any business activity which is considered by the management as a separate source of revenue will be considered as an operating segment. The operating results of such operating segments are regularly reviewed by the chief operating decision maker to make decisions about resource allocation and performance measurement. So this is your overall picture. This is your overall picture of the standard. Okay, so आज हम जो discuss कर रहे हैं, it is these 4 steps. Okay, now we come to the critical analysis, that is stepwise discussions. So step 1, who is the chief operating decision maker? Who is the chief operating decision maker? As I said, the chief operating decision maker is that person who is responsible for allocation of resources, who is responsible for assessing the performance, who is responsible for generating the numbers, who is responsible for the profitability. So typically from your understanding, who do you think will be the chief operating decision maker? Can a CFO become a chief operating decision maker? Can a CFO become a chief operating decision maker? Yes. What do you guys think? A chief? Yes, Nisha.
It is possible, so if we understand how each segment works.
Not very much audible. Others, Monica?
Sir,
Jeannie?
it should be Chief Executive Officer.
Chief Executive
Yes,
Officer.
sir. CEO.
Okay, so Monica. Jeannie? Pooja? Mamta? Niranjan?
CFO is generally deals with the financial
Yes.
financially data of the company.
Yes. Yes. That's right.
Guidance
Yes.
about
So all of us are clear. ये भाई हमारा काम नहीं है. Okay. Tomorrow you guys will probably graduate to CFOs at some of the organizations where you go. So this is not my work. Okay. Allocating resources, responsibility for performances. No. As a
Chief Operating Officer, no?
Yes.
CEO.
COO. So that's what I'm coming. As a CFO, your responsibility is ensuring funds are available, giving a predictability on the numbers, and giving a snapshot of the performance of the entity. As a CFO, you will not be expected to go to the shop floor to decide who is working on what. Okay, that is not your lookout. So the hierarchy levels are pretty clear in corporate. So it is either the chief operating officer, chief operations officer, or the CEO, as most of you said, the chief executive officer. We have these two individuals. If at all it is at an individual level where we have to decide on the allocation of resources, performance of the entity, etc., etc. So either a COO or a CEO. Okay, these are the two people who will be typically your chief operating decision makers. But understand, Ind AS 108 talks about the chief operating decision maker as a function. It is not restricting it to a person or a designation. Okay. So अगर कोई designation है ही नहीं, there is no COO, CEO in the organization. Do you think that CODM will not be present? Answer is no. CODM फिर भी होगा. Uska designation could be different. For example, they would say head operations, or they could say operations manager, or they can give any other name under the sun. Okay, they can give any other name under the sun. They can give a name like business unit head. Okay, they can give a name like whatever XYZ. Okay, so naam se kuch nahi hota hai. What is important is what is the work that you are doing. So this is a function-based classification. Okay, chief operating decision maker is purely function-based. It is not based. It can be an individual. It can be a group of individuals. It can be a committee. कुछ भी हो सकता है. But जो भी है, that designation or that committee or that individual or that group is the one who is responsible for allocation of resources, performance and assessment of performance Okay. What does the chief operating decision maker's functions involve? Allocation of resources of the entity, assessment of performance of operating segments, and making strategic decisions about the entity segment. So now, for example, we saw this case, entry segment, mid-range, SUVs and sedans. Tell me, if you are in the place of business heads, will your approach to each of these segments be the same or will they be different?
Different, sir.
They will be different. They cannot be the same. You cannot say, I made a profit, सब equally बांट दो, we will allocate the resources equally to everybody. आप नहीं कर सकते ऐसा. Your approach has to be radically different. Take a case of an entity like IHCL, okay, Indian Hotels Company Limited, that is part of the Tata Group. So here you are having brands like Ginger, then you are having brands like Vivanta, then you are having Taj, then you are having Gateway, and now they have something known as AMA stays. Okay. Now, the whole point is, will my strategies, will my operations, will my allocations, will my future course of action be exactly the same? नहीं हो सकता भाई, cannot happen. Your thought process for Ginger and your thought process for Taj will be totally different. Okay, Ginger is a budget hotel, a business hotel, which ranges in the range where the pricing ranges about 3 to 6,000 rupees per night. 6,000 for upscale properties which are situated in metros, in official locations. 3,000 again in office locations, but say in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Okay, so your approach for a 3 to 6,000 rupee per night will be quite different from what Taj is offering in its Exotica properties, where per night the prices range from anywhere between 50,000 to 75,000 per night. So you cannot have, for instance, the same amenities in Ginger what you are providing in the Taj. वो price pit में बैठेगा ही नहीं. Okay. The category of people, you cannot expect business travelers to stay in Taj Exotica because these are more close to holiday destinations. Typically, a business traveler, somebody like a partner of a consultant firm, suppose you are an assurance partner, you are an assurance engagement, you may come and stay in the Vivanta. This is a business segment, an upscale business property. Okay. Vivanta has positioned itself like that. It is a business travelers hotel, but it is placed above the Ginger. So in a Vivanta, you can have your pricings range from 11 to 15,000 per night starting. But again, Vivanta's approach The locations where they place their properties is quite different from how Exotica places its properties. You may find an Exotica in the Maldives. You will find an Exotica in a place like Goa. You will find an Exotica in a place like Andamans probably. You will not find a Vivanta there. You will not find a Vivanta in Maldives because कोई business traveler will not go and sit in the Maldives generally. Okay. A business traveler will prefer a hotel. So your strategies are completely different. And therefore, this is definitely not a finance officer's job. But what is important is making strategic decisions about the entity segment. That is your objective. That is what you are looking at. So when I come back to this, strategic decisions, if your sedans are not performing well, what are the two strategies you can think? One strategy is let us allow the sedans to die a natural death. We will not allocate any resources. हम demand के हिसाब से we will manufacture. But if we are having 10 assembly lines, maybe we will cut down the assembly lines for sedans. Okay. We will slowly start dismantling the assembly lines, or we will start configuring the assembly lines to manufacture SUVs in place of sedans where the demand is multiplying. Are you able to understand? So my strategies will depend on what is the segment I cater to and how I'm going to perform. Suppose you believe that the sedans will definitely be there in the market, but it will not phase out. It will have more of a steady growth. Okay, it will have more of a steady growth. I'll cut down the assembly lines. I will keep 2 to 3 assembly lines. उसी में हम काम चलाते रहेंगे. We will continue to do the production in those assembly lines, no matter what be the pressure of the demand. If I see the demand pressure rising significantly, then I will take a strategic decision to increase the assembly lines for manufacturing sedans. So if you look at the hospitality segment, then post-COVID, the rise of travel is stupendous. Okay, people are just craving for travel at the drop of a hat. You get a long weekend, people go for holidays. Okay, so in light of this sudden spurt in travel, hotels have had to come with a lot of strategies. Okay, Taj, for example, is having 36 properties coming up in Goa. Okay, so that is one thing which is going to definitely change the dynamics. Today, if you look at IHCL's report, they say that almost 30 to 35% of its revenues come from the state of Goa because they understand that the normal traveler in India who is not looking for an international travel, their first choice for an idyllic seaside location is Goa. So they are investing in Goa. They are investing heavily in Goa for their growth. Okay. So that is the way they position their strategies. Their locations for business hotels like Ginger and Vivanta. They don't place Ginger and Vivanta in a seaside location. It will be in the hub of commercial spaces. It will be in the hub of your locations. Okay. So that is how they do their strategies. All right. So the chief operating decision maker is responsible for allocating the resources and assess the performance of the operating segments of the entity. Now, who can be the chief operating decision maker? It can be individuals like CEO or COO. It could be a committee like a senior management or the board of directors. It cannot be a supervisory board that just approves and or reviews decision. Okay. Everybody knows the structure of governance in India. Yes, हमारा जो executive level है ना, we have judiciary and we have the executive. So executive में we have the prime minister and his cabinet of ministers. और उसके ऊपर कौन बैठता है? The president of India. Yes, if I come to the state, then I have the chief minister and his cabinet, and इनके ऊपर कौन बैठता है? The governor. Yes. Now, आप मुझे बताओ, who is the chief operating decision maker in this? Who is the chief operating decision maker?
Prime Minister and Chief Minister, respectively.
Prime Minister and his cabinet, or the Chief Minister and his cabinet? Is the president or the governor a chief operating decision maker? Answer is no. The president and the governor are titles which are given. They are honors which are bestowed. They only review, they only have a supervisory function. They only have a supervisory function. Suppose there is a breakdown of law and order in a particular state, then there is an imposition of president's rule. Otherwise, as long as the prime minister and his cabinet and the chief minister and his cabinet are delivering their functions effectively, as long as they are able to maintain law and order in the particular state or the country, there is no reason for the president or the governor to interfere in the day-to-day operations. Nahi chahiye wo. Okay, because the PM and the CM are efficient enough to manage their activities of governance, So the prime minister and his cabinet, the CM and his cabinet, these are the people who become the chief operating decision makers for whatever category they are working in. And that is true. Today, I have a transportations minister who is building highways, who is responsible for the highways. Today, I am having a railway minister who is responsible for the railways and who is ultimately responsible for the safety, security, etc. I have an aviation minister who is looking after the growth of the airport infrastructure, who is looking at the spurt, and who should also be looking at the fact that the airline industry is now a duopoly between two airlines, Air India and Indigo. So they should probably now look into the fact that how is it impacting the pricing and how are the customers going to evaluate air travel in that regard. The railway minister will look at how are my tickets getting priced. So each of these individuals are having their specific role. Okay. The finance minister of a state will probably look into am I having adequate money for the infrastructure development for which the center is not going to fund me? Am I catering to the promises that I made for the elections? Am I collecting adequate taxes, or do I need to increase the taxes from the people? And am I getting adequate GST from the center that I should be getting? Or is there something that is yet to be received? So all these situations is something that a state department's finance is going to look at. The central department's finance will look at are the GST rates rational? Do we need to rationalize them? Then they'll call a meeting for the GST council. Are the income taxes getting collected? Are the assessments going on fine? All these things are something that the central government's finance ministry decides. So each of these segments, PM and CM, are responsible for making the decisions, Allocation of resources to the defense of the country, allocation of resources to the infrastructure development of the country, allocation of resources towards supporting neighboring countries, by giving, say, a line of credit, or in times of crisis by providing humanitarian aid. All these things are nothing but allocation of resources. And the president or the governor will have no say in this regard. Unless there is a breakdown of law and order, they are only reviewers of the decisions. So many times, in fact, all the times that you and I have seen, when there is a finance budget, when there is the budget that gets proposed, and then you have the finance bill, have we come across a situation in known times that the president has sent back the finance bill without approving it? Have we come across such a situation? No. भाई प्रेसिडेंट नहीं कर सकता ऐसा. प्रेसिडेंट cannot come down to your level and question you, why did you do like this, why did you do like that, as long as you are within the parameters of operations. Okay, unless there is an undue issue, you will never see a president coming down and rejecting signing of a finance bill. It typically जो finance bill में है, there may be one or two discussions with stakeholders like the institute or the Institute of Cost Accountants or company secretaries, the finance professionals. There could be a couple of discussions. Maybe what was proposed in the finance budget and the final bill that is being sent, there could be some minor tweaks, but that is the one which will go to the president, and the president will only give his or her confirmation to that as a formality. Okay, so these are people who are on the supervisory levels. We cannot really bring them down to chief operating decision maker levels. They are not responsible. They are only in a position to review. And finally, what is the fundamental criteria to ensure the correct identification of the reportable segment? By what is my reportable segment? That is ultimately what I want to identify. That is ultimately what I want to identify. Okay. So coming to the next one, some obvious question. Can a committee of non-executive directors be a chief operating decision maker? Acha. Who is a non-executive director?
They don't participate in the everyday functioning of the business.
Who?
They don't participate in the everyday functioning of
That's
the business.
right. So नॉन एग्जीक्यूटिव डायरेक्टर मतलब ये सिनेमा में कोई गेस्ट अपीयरेंस में आता है ना, मूवीज में. यस, गेस्ट अपीयरेंस. ओके, 3 घंटे के मूवी में 10 मिनट का गेस्ट अपीयरेंस आ गया किसी का. ओके, सो दैट इज व्हाट योर नॉन एग्जीक्यूटिव डायरेक्टर्स आर. दे कम only for attending board meetings. They have a certain level of expertise, and that expertise they bring it at the board meetings, but they are not responsible for the day-to-day functioning. Okay, they are not responsible for the day-to-day functioning. So non-executive directors are not involved in resource allocation decisions. Their role is primarily related to governance rather than a management role. The non-executive directors, why they are important is because many times you may have the auditors or the internal auditors who may not find themselves free to discuss issues with the company's management, but they will be free to discuss it with the independent directors, say in an audit committee meeting where the independent directors is a majority, where the number of independent directors is supposed to be a majority. So there the auditors can freely express their opinions. Say for example, if there is a fraud in the organization. Now it becomes incumbent upon the non-executive directors to discuss these issues with the management and expect a report, expect a revert, expect an action to be taken. So in all these cases, their role becomes a governance-oriented role rather than an operational role. So therefore, it will generally not be they cannot generally become a chief operating decision maker. But as is the case with all professional consultants, सीधे मुंह जवाब तो होता नहीं है, तो हमेशा एक if या आता है, however आता है, but आता है. ये आना ही है. That is the normal course of discussions. Okay, so when you see a question, see any profession you go, whether it is chartered accountants, whether it is cost accountants, whether it is company secretaries, whether it is lawyers, whether it is medical professionals, आप कहीं भी जाओ, nobody will give an affirmative answer, yes or no. We will always say this can also happen, but that can also happen. Okay, because हम सब पढ़ते हैं ना, we study so much, so we know that there are multiple perspectives. There are multiple perspectives. Okay, many times the more we study, the more we become sure of the uncertainties. Okay, matlab we become certain that there are many uncertainties in the overall outlook. Okay, so This case also, is NED responsible? Answer is generally no, but a function would be CODM if the most significant operating as well as strategic decisions are made by that function, even if NEDs do not participate in implementing such decision. So basically, keh kya rahe hai, if the board of directors has offloaded this responsibility to a committee, and that committee has non-executive directors on board, then that committee will continue to be a CODM because it is taking the most significant operational and strategic decisions. Are you able to understand? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that takes care of NEDs. Okay.
Sir, only diplomatic answer था ये.
तो क्या कर सकते हैं, वो ऐसे ही है. ओके. डिप्लोमेसी इज द पार्ट ऑफ द ट्रेड. ओके, करना पड़ता है. यस, बट टिपिकली दैट्स हाउ इट इज. यू गो टू एनी प्रोफेशनल के पास जाओ, you will never get an answer yes or no, and this is not for us because that is the way it is. Okay, आप डॉक्टर के पास जाओ for a serious ailment, they will give you 2 to 3, and हमारा भी देखो, हम सेकंड ओपिनियन में जाएंगे, हम थर्ड ओपिनियन लेंगे. Why? Because we are always searching for that answer which suits us. So the professionals also will want to give you that answer which you want to hear. Okay. So many times it depends on the way the expectation is placed by the one who asks a question. Okay. So that is how the whole professional scenario is. Okay. Nothing wrong in that. It's just that we know that multiple options exist. Okay. So coming to 2-3 small illustrations. The executive committee of XYZ comprises of CEO, COO, and the president. The committee assesses performance and allocates the resources. Each committee member has a single vote. Identify the CODM. Who becomes your CODM here? Is it
CEO or
CEO, COO, president? See, I told you, designation पे मत जाओ, काम पे जाओ. Look at the work. Who is doing what? Okay. Read the question. Try to tell. It is not restricted to one individual. Yes.
Executive committee is the CODM here.
Yes. Executive committee is the CODM. देखो, committee is the one which assesses the performance. Yes. Committee takes the decision. Each of them has one vote. Who? The CEO, COO, and president. So obviously the decisions will be taken on a majority basis. So is one person individually deciding, or is the committee as a whole taking these decisions?
committee as a whole taking.
Committee as a whole is taking the decisions. हम designation के हिसाब से नहीं चल सकते. That is the beauty of Indian accounting standards. The beauty of Ind AS is it is principle based. It is not rule based. Otherwise, what they would have done rule based होता तो CODM. CODM कौन है? CEO is your CODM. There would be a statement. अच्छा, जिस कंपनी में CEO का डेसिग्नेशन ही नहीं है, सर, तब तो सोचना पड़ेगा. तो the standard says मत सोचो. We will give a principle. The principle is that what you can say, that person or group of persons which is responsible for allocation of resources, assessment of performance, and future strategic actions. So all these things in the first question are performed by the committee or by the individuals. Answer is by the committee. There is a बकायदा एक voting process है. उस voting process में obviously जिसका majority होगा, that will be the decision which is taken. It may be unanimous also. For a segment like sedans, for example, which is phasing out, all of them may unanimously say, let it die its natural death. In which case the committee has decided. We cannot say that CEO or COO individually has decided. So there is a very democratic way of functioning in this case. The committee itself becomes the CODM. The committee itself becomes the CODM. Acha. Coming to question 2. Consider the facts as above, except that the president can override the vote of the committee. Except that the president can override the vote of the committee. Identify the CODM. Who becomes your CODM here?
So President,
President. Anybody else? Nisha?
The president, sir.
Okay. Ginny, Mamta, Niranjan, Pooja.
The president, as it can override the vote of the committee.
President bolega. Suppose you have those other two called by CEO and COO says, we will phase out sedan segment. President will say, नहीं, हम phase out नहीं करेंगे, हम उसको चलाएंगे. Even if we are bleeding, we will let it run. Yes, the profits from SUV, we will plow it back into the sedan segment because I believe that sedans will have a growth in the future. So no matter what the CEO and COO tell, the president wants to burn his hands for the time being because he believes the burnt hands will bring gold in the future. ठीक है, तो president बोल रहा है, president voted in favor. So go ahead, do whatever the president says. So the president in this case becomes the chief operating decision maker. And question 3, facts are similar to question 1, except that the supervisory board reviews the operations of the executive committee. So facts are similar. So now you tell me who becomes the chief operating decision maker.
Executive committee.
Executive Committee.
Executive committee. Supervisory board only reviews. वो सिर्फ सोचेगा. That's it. Okay, वो सिर्फ review करेगा. उसके अलावा he will not do anything else. And therefore, the supervisory board cannot be the CODM. It is the executive committee which becomes the chief operating decision maker. Are we able to understand? Yes. So CODM is very clear, I hope. So step 1 is over. Any doubt so far?
No.
Any doubt? No doubt.
That's it.
Okay. So now let us move on to the next. Identification of an operating segment. Okay. Now, first one. Does the component generate revenues and or incurs expenses, including revenues and expenses relating to transactions with other components of the same entity? What does it mean? A particular segment, is it independently generating revenues? That is very critical. So when we talk about segment identification, ability to generate revenue by itself is the most fundamental requirement for it to become a segment, Now, this can be either external revenues, which is actually a recognizable revenue in the books of accounts, or it could even be internal revenue for captive consumptions. That means transfer from one department to the other. But important is, in दोनों में से कुछ तो होना चाहिए. There has to be one among these two for certain. There is no exception to this. So for example, let us say that Hyundai also has a spares manufacturing division. Now the spares manufacturing division of Hyundai does not sell spares to outside. Rather, it sells it to the automobile division itself. Let us assume for the time being, there are no showroom concepts. This particular Hyundai company itself reaches out to the end customer. It is itself responsible for servicing and it is responsible for spares. So Hyundai manufactures the spares, but it does not directly sell the spares outside. Rather, what it does is it sells those spares to the servicing division. Servicing division carries out the servicing, adds in the spares, and then sells it to the outside end. So now, can I say that the spares division is capable of generating revenues, or can I say it is generating revenues? Yes,
Not only consumed.
it is giving me revenues, but it is giving me which type of revenues? Only internal revenues. Only internal revenues. It is generating, but only internal. So does the component generate revenues? That is internal transfers plus external revenues. Both of them or one of them at least होना चाहिए. अच्छा, finance department in a company, does it generate revenue?
No, sir.
नहीं
No.
होता भाई. तभी तो that is the reason हम कोई segment में आते नहीं है. We come as a cost center. We come in as a cost center. But if I look at a big multinational accounting firm or a mid-sized firm, you will be having assurance engagements team, you will be having the tax advisory services team, you will be having the financial advisory, accounting and advisory services team, you could be having the transactions advisory team or the transactions and due diligence advisory, you could have forensic audit advisory. Yes, so there are multiple items which generate revenues. Acha. Now, when I go for an assurance engagement, the assurance engagement team is performing the audit and assurance function, and there is a matter on tax that the client has taken a particular position. Now, assurance engagement team is not an expert to comment on that position. So what the assurance team does, it forwards that issue to the tax team. The tax team will provide its opinion on the stand taken for completion of the assurance engagement, but the tax team has invested its hours. The tax team has put in some professionals. The tax team has put in some discussions with the tax partner. The tax partner ultimately forwards his opinion to the assurance team. Now, there will be a cross charge from the tax team on the assurance team. Yes, because hours are spent by the tax team. That is helping the assurance team to understand the implication of that and whether a provision needs to be taken or not, etc. वो जो भी case है. Okay. So now my point is the tax team's cross charge to the assurance engagement, will it be considered in revenue?
Yes, sir.
Yes, वो revenue में consider होगा. And that is why suppose my tax department is not at all catering to individual to external customers. Hypothetical, but it is a very extreme scenario, but hypothetical. Okay. Suppose I have a tax team जो यही काम करता है. Assurance team is my whole and soul. Bread bolo, butter bolo, cheese bolo, जो बोलना है बोलो. Assurance team is my everything. But I have a supporting team in the form of the tax team. It is giving its opinions to the assurance team because the tax positions are multitude for the setup of for the clients of this entity. Now, how am I going to view this? How am I going to view this? The tax team is a separate segment, is generating revenue. Separate segment and all baat ki baat hai. It is a separate, it is able to generate internal revenue. So, does the component generate revenue? If the answer is no, it is not an operating segment. So, आप कहीं भी जाओ, finance department in an industry will never become an operating segment. Okay, that is why finance teams are always having a pressure from the other departments that we are a support function, that we have to cater to the needs of the business, etc., etc. Okay, now coming to the next one. Are the components results reviewed regularly by the CODM to make decisions about resource allocation and to assess its performance? So this is the business element. This is the business element. AS 17 में क्या होता था? AS 17 में are the components risk and rewards same or different as assessed by the accountant? ऐसा लिखता था, बट यहां पे क्या लिखा है, are the results reviewed separately by the CODM? So there is a change, there is a radical change in the standard. There is a radical change in the standard. So are they reviewed regularly? If it is no, it does not become an operating segment. It does not become an operating segment. If yes, then we move on to the next one. Is discrete financial information for the component available? Discrete means what? हम आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते हैं इस कंपोनेंट का रेवेन्यू कितना है, कॉस्ट्स कितने हैं, आइडेंटिफाइबल एसेट्स एंड लायबिलिटीज कितने हैं. Am I able to identify that? Okay. See, ultimately, you have to understand the structure. There will be some identified assets. There will be some identified assets. There will be some common assets. Okay. If I talk about Hyundai again, okay, I'm going back because I have built a connectedness to that. If I talk about Hyundai, I have identified assembly lines for sedans. I have identified assembly lines for SUVs, for hatchbacks. Now, additionally, Hyundai has a corporate office. That corporate office, तो सबका asset हो गया. Yes, because the corporate office is the head of the entire organization. So my question is, from the corporate office, can I generate discrete financial information on the sales? Answer is yes. On the cost? Answer is yes. On assets allocable, on assets identifiable to the components? Answer is yes. On liabilities identifiable? Answer could be yes or no. Answer could be yes or no. Because what happens is, a vendor, okay, suppose these what you say, these vehicles, they probably buy lot of hard plastics for furnishing of the interiors. Okay, these hard plastics are purchased for the entry level segment also, for the mid-range hatchbacks also, for base variants of SUVs as well as the sedans. तो तीनों के केस में my vendor remains the same. Doesn't matter. Can I allocate it? Answer is yes. कर तो सकते हो. It may not be direct. You may have to do some allocation, but that you can definitely do. Okay. So is discrete financial information available? If the answer is no, it will not be an operating segment. But if it is available, then the segment becomes an operating segment. So what are the conditions we are bound to look at? The conditions we are bound to look at is, does the component give revenues? If the answer to that is yes, is it viewed independently by the CODM? If that is yes, is discrete financial information available? If all these three answers are yes, then the question is answered that the segment becomes an operating segment. Did we understand? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Jeannie, Pooja, Stephen, Kishore.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Fine. Okay. So that takes care of this. Okay. So now we have certain illustrations. Abhi bhi it's not complete. Okay. Step number 2 is slightly big. Then we come to the reportable segments. Okay. Right. Illustration 1. ABC Limited manufactures and sells healthcare products and food and grocery products. 3 products, namely A, B, and C, are manufactured. Product A is classified as a healthcare product, and B and C are classified as food and grocery products. B and C are similar products, so food and grocery, healthcare. B and C are similar products. Discrete financial information is available for each manufacturing location and for the selling activity of each product. There are 2 line managers responsible for manufacturing activities of products A, B, and C. X manages product A, which is basically your healthcare product. B manages products B and C. The operating results of healthcare products, product A, and food and grocery products B and C are regularly reviewed by the CODM. So now the question is identify the reportable segments of ABC Limited. अभी हम reportable segment पे गए नहीं है, but ठीक है. Let us assume for the time being operating segments and reportable segments are used interchangeably. अब बताइए, what is going to be my identified segments?
Healthcare and food and grocery segment, 2 segments.
Yes, 2 segments. Healthcare and food and grocery. ठीक है? You cannot go to product structures. That's right. So A becomes one segment, that is healthcare. B and C together becomes another segment, that is food and grocery. Okay. So that takes care of this. The CEO, along with other board members, do a review of financial information about various business segments and take decisions on the basis of discrete information available for these segments and are correctly identified as chief operating decision maker. Review of only revenue information is done for decision making about those segments by the CODM. As per CODM, many segments require minimal costs due to centralization of costs. Whether review of only the revenue related information is sufficient for these segments to be considered as operating segments for the purposes of Ind AS 108. Tell me, what do you think? Sirf revenue data is adequate or cost data also is essential?
Revenue data, sir.
Achha.
First point for revenue only.
हाँ. So see,
So
yes, बताइए.
says that the many segments minimal cost requirement है, मतलब revenue का importance ज्यादा है as compared to cost. So
इसलिए रेवेन्यू ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है आपने बताया. आई एम आस्किंग व्हाई.
so वो centralization of cost की
That's
वजह
right. That's right. That is what I want to hear. What? See, first of all, I got multiple answers from all of you. All of you are right in your own way. Like, I got one answer which said that revenue is critical. Absolutely right. Totally agree. But there is another answer which I got, sir, cost also is essential. That is also absolutely right. And then Pooja fit in the last part in the jigsaw puzzle, centralization of costs. So in this case, the chief operating decision maker should ideally look at revenue as well as costs. Why? Uska function hai wo. He is responsible for results. सिर्फ रेवेन्यू से काम नहीं चलेगा. ओके, रेवेन्यू इज नॉट परफॉर्मेंस. प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी इज योर परफॉर्मेंस. कैश जनरेशन इज योर परफॉर्मेंस. ओके, अल्टीमेटली लेट मी बी वेरी क्लियर. इट ऑल बॉइल्स डाउन टू द फैक्ट आप कितना प्रॉफिट बना रहे हो. यस, दैट इज व्हाट द चीफ ऑपरेटिंग डिसीजन मेकर इज मेंट टू बी. एंड सिर्फ प्रॉफिट से काम नहीं चलेगा, आप कितना कैश जनरेट कर रहे हो. These are fundamental questions that we have to answer. These are fundamental questions that we are responsible for. Books में profit दिखाने से काम नहीं बनता है. What is important is out of that profit, how much cash is left on the table. That is what is the most critical thing. That is what is the most critical thing. Are we able to understand? Yes. So now the CEO, along with other board members, they are identified as CODM. So whether review of only revenue related performance is sufficient? In this case, yes, because cost is centralized. Cost is centralized. Otherwise, it's not adequate. Otherwise, it's definitely not adequate. Cost also forms a critical function for the CODM's efficiency. All clear? Yes. So that takes care of this question. Yes. Let us then move on to the next one. Okay. अभी थोड़े बहुत you have theories. Okay. We have a designation known as a segment manager, a function which is accountable to the CODM to discuss operating activities, financial results, forecasts, or plans for the segment. Okay, so in the place where I work, we have something known as a function that caters to the Middle East, a function that caters to United States and Europe. And both of them are reporting to the chief operating officer. Both of them are are reporting to the chief operating officers. So these two divisions who are headed by what we call as the business unit heads. The business unit heads in this case become what we call as a segment manager. What we call as a segment manager. Okay. To discuss operating activities, financial results, forecasts or plans for the segment. Forecasts or plans for the segment. The chief operating decision maker also can be a segment manager. Many times क्या होता है, my segments have still not yet grown so much to appoint an individual segment manager for both of them. So the CODM himself reviews the segments and खुद ही अपना decision बनाता है. Okay, he himself makes his decisions. So that is also possible. And additionally, a single segment manager may manage more than one operating segments. In another of my group entities, I have a single segment manager who is looking after multiple businesses. Okay, that is still a growing entity. तो एक segment manager काफी है, and that segment manager reports to the COO of that specific group entity. So ultimately, the point what I'm trying to say is there are no rules. There are no rules. Okay. Segment manager is a function. It is not a designation. You cannot say that a business unit head becomes a segment manager, or I need to give the categorization of segment manager to that individual. Okay. He is responsible to report to the CODM. What will he report? Operating activities, results, forecasts, or plans for the segment. CODM also can be a segment manager. Single segment manager may manage more than one operating segments. Is it okay? समझ में आ गया? Yes, all right. Now, segment managers for one set. If characteristics apply to more than one set of components, but there is only one set of for which segment managers are held responsible, then that set of components constitutes the operating segment. Okay. So characteristics apply to multiple operating segments, but there is only one set for which segment managers are held accountable. आपके कई सारे segments हो सकते हैं, right? But accountability is coming only for one segment. Accountability is coming only for one segment. Then only that set of components will constitute the operating segment. Okay. All right. Now, matrix form. Two or more overlapping sets of components for which managers are held responsible. Example, in some entities, some managers are responsible for different products and service lines worldwide, whereas other managers are responsible for specific geographical areas. CODM reviews operating results of both the sets of components, and financial information is available for both. Refer the core principle to determine which set of components constitute an operating segment. So many times what happens, overlap is quite possible. Okay. Overlap matlab kya? I also look at geographical segments. I also look at the business segments. Okay. Like, for example, I could be having, okay, this is an example. See, where I'll give example from where I work. So we cater to Middle East, we cater to Europe, we cater to United States. Okay, so we cater in these multiple geographical locations, but our product offerings are also different. Okay, we are also catering, let us say, for example, in fiber optics. We also cater in the electronics division segments, right? So, and these segments are different businesses, but they are also getting supplied across the globe. They are also getting supplied across the globe differently. So what happens is there is an overlap. There is an overlap. A fiber optic business could be supplied domestic also, could be supplied export also. In export, it may go either to the United States or it could go to the Middle East, or it could even go to Europe. Same is the case with the opposite side, that is the electronics. Electronics also, I may be catering to Middle East, I may cater to Europe. Okay, so now my point is, there is an overlapping set of components. There is an overlapping set of components. Okay. Some managers are responsible for some particular set of components. Some managers are responsible for only specific geographical areas. So that we call as a matrix form. That we call as a matrix form. So how do I identify who is the segment manager and what should be my operating segments? Answer to that is you look at the core principle. You look at the core principle. Okay. So now let us come on to these two illustrations. I think this will clarify this particular concept. So X Limited is engaged in the manufacture and sale of two distinct type of products, A and B. X supplies the product in the domestic market in India as well as in Singapore. There are two regional managers responsible for manufacturing activities of A and B worldwide, and also two other managers responsible for different geographical areas. For internal reporting purposes, X provides information product-wise and as per the geographical location of the company. The CODM regularly reviews the operating results of both the sets of components. How should X Limited identify its operating segments? बताइए.
सर दोनों के मतलब दोनों ही क्राइटेरिया हो जाएंगे, जोग्राफिकल सेल्स एंड प्रोडक्ट एरिया.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So what you have to understand is, how does the CODM want to view? Is he wanting to view geographical performance? Is he wanting to view product line performance? Is he wanting to view both? How is he accountable? Is he accountable for the market's profitability in India or Singapore? Is he responsible for the product line profitability, A or B? Or is he accountable for everything? So when all these questions are answered, when all these questions are taken into consideration, you can identify your operating segments. More likely than not, what they have said, the CODM reviews the results of both the sets of components, and also he may want to view it geographically, and therefore taking into consideration all these factors, you will have to decide what becomes your operating segment. What becomes your operating segment? Okay. Coming to illustration 4, CODM of XY Limited receives and reviews multiple sets of information when assessing the business's overall performance to take a decision on resource allocation. It receives the information as under: Level 1 report, summary for all 4 regions. Level 2, summary for 20 sub-regions within those regions. Level 3, detailed report for 50 branches within the sub-regions. What factors and levels should be considered for determining an operating segment? Acha. Is case mein they have not given any specific information. They have said you have regions. Below the regions, you have sub-regions. Below the sub-regions, you have branches. So, आप यहाँ पे ना, you cannot give a straightforward answer. You will have to say, How does the CODM assess the performance? Does he assess the performance branch wise or sub-region wise or region wise? Then next one, how am I budgeting for this particular company? Am I budgeting branch wise or am I budgeting sub-region wise or region wise? And last one is identify the segment managers and their responsibility areas. So these are the categories that you will evaluate before deciding which one becomes your operating segment. Are we able to follow?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
सर इस क्वेश्चन को पढ़ने के बाद मेरे माइंड में ये आया था कि हम अलोकेशन कैसे करेंगे, कोई भी अलोकेशन क्राइटेरिया ही गिवन नहीं है यहाँ पर, कुछ भी ना सेल्स बेस है ना कुछ और बेस है, कैसे
हाँ,
रिव्यू करेगा वो?
कौन सा वाला? ये नंबर 4 वाला?
लास्ट फोर्थ वाला, यस सर।
हाँ, तो
जस्ट ओनली जस्ट
4
ओनली बेसिक इंफॉर्मेशन गिवन थी कि ये रीजंस हैं, बट
कुछ भी नहीं दिया है. That's right.
दिया।
So what factors and level should be considered? बस इतना ही पूछा है. They have not asked operating segments कौन से हैं. So we will look at allocation, budget decisions. Then we will look. See, many times what happens is there are now this is the, I won't say limitation, but this is where things become a little murky. Murky समझते हो? Murky means haze, clear नहीं रहता है. Many times what happens is you would be having something like a centralized function, जैसे supply chain management. Supply chain team could be a centralized team which is located somewhere in the heart of the operations, but it is catering to supply chain of United States branch. It is catering to supply chain of domestic branch. It is catering to some faraway location. It is looking at fiber as well as electronics or different lines of business. जो भी है, okay? So now the question is, the supply chain is centralized, but what do I do about the cost of the SCMP? How do I allocate the costs to the various business segments? कैसे करोगे आप? Suppose I have 15 people on my supply chain and I have 3 lines of business, A, B, and C. How am I going to allocate to A, B, and C?
सर जनरली तो ABC लोकेशंस होता है, मतलब बेसिस ऑफ ABC,
हाँ,
बट
प्रोडक्ट लाइन समझ लो फिलहाल.
हम्म
तो आप कैसे allocate करोगे उनके कॉस्ट?
सर डिपेंड, अगर कोई डायरेक्टली एट्रीब्यूटेबल कॉस्ट है तो वो डायरेक्टली एट्रीब्यूटेबल हो जाएगी, अदरवाइज कुछ कॉमन जनरल कॉस्ट है तो वो डिपेंड, वो जो रेशियो डिसाइडेड बाय द CODM होगा वो उस रेशियो में डिवाइड हो जाएंगे.
CODM इस लेवल पे आएगा ही नहीं. CODM will say finance, that's your job. Now, how am I going to allocate? Can I allocate on a revenue basis? Revenue by A, B, C, उस ratio में can I allocate the cost? That is one possibility. Can I allocate the cost based on purchase orders placed for A, B, and C? Number of purchase orders I am placing, because that is the amount of time that they are spending. Revenue तो बनता रहेगा. Revenue is a function of sales. If product A selling price is very high, then procurements will be very low for A because margins will be very high. So therefore, B and C may relatively require more purchase orders. So then if I have to go purchase order wise, then I can allocate based on purchase order wise. Number 3, how many new vendors have I brought in for A, B, and C? Because new vendors means more time will go in vendor assessment, more time will go in vendor negotiation, price negotiations, tendering and bidding process agar hai to, evaluation of competence of the vendor. So all these factors, that is why I said the whole process tends to get a little hazy at times. आप decide नहीं कर सकते. Some people will say equally बांट दो, because ये काम तो सबका ही कर रहे हैं, तो equally you divide it. Some people will say, then the CODM will say, why equally? Because equally अगर करेंगे, then the margins which are highest will take a very low share of cost, and जिसका margins already low है, they will take a very high share of the cost, and then ultimately that will end up becoming a loss-making segment, when in fact that's probably not a correct way to do the allocation. So when we come to these decisions as a finance department, our role and the data that we are required to support, it tends to become hazy. It tends to become hazy. We cannot really define on the ground levels कि हम कैसे इसको allocate करेंगे. So then what do I ask? Do I ask my supply chain team, you only maintain the time that you have spent for department A, B, and C. And end of the day, what is the time that you have spent on each of the departments? उस हिसाब से I will allocate your cost. वो भी कर सकते हो, yes. But how practical it is? भाई एंड में क्वेश्चन वही आता है ना कि वो कितना प्रैक्टिकल है. तो मतलब वो सुबह आएगा, he spends half an hour placing a purchase order for product A business line. Then he spends 1 hour for B. Then उसने आधा घंटा lunch break लिया. तो whole day instead of placing purchase orders, he will maintain time sheet. Purchase order नहीं बन रहे but time sheet बन रहा है. So are you able to understand? So it's not really feasible. It's not really practical. There will be a great degree of approximation that is going to come. Mostly entities prefer allocation of revenue on the basis of revenue. But as I say, and I still say, revenue cannot be the basis for deciding all the costs, because it is highly unlikely that all my costs will move in similar trends as the revenue. नहीं होता है. Margins will be different. Products purchased is going to be different. So it just cannot go on the basis of revenue. Okay? So anyways, so what factors you should consider? Allocation of budget, and what is the process used to assess the performance, and finally the segment managers and their responsibilities. Yes. Okay. Now, there could be some cases where some of the functions are integral to a business, like the R&D function for a pharmaceuticals or a software company. So even in our company, we do have an R&D segment where we are introducing, where we are working on new technologies which do not generate revenue immediately. Okay. But we are anticipating that they generate revenues in the next 5 or 10 years. But we need to work because technology is growing towards that. Okay. So now, when we work in such, when we have such segments, it becomes critical for me to identify. It becomes critical for me to identify that R&D center. R&D center, does it generate revenue? Answer is no. Acha, R&D center's cost, will it always be an intangible asset? Tell me, you people have studied Ind AS 38? 38, na? Yeah, Ind AS 38. Have you studied Ind AS 38?
Yes, sir.
So, bataiye. In a company, I have an R&D center. For that R&D center, I spend 20 lakh rupees per month as cost of the people. I have put in 5 people over there. These 5 people on a monthly basis, I pay them 20 lakhs. This 20 lakhs, practical example, okay? This is something which we deal with on a day-to-day basis. 20 lakh rupees, should it be expensed or should it be capitalized as an intangible asset? Bataiye. And why?
Future economic benefits should be considered.
Future economic benefits
Should be considered while making the decision.
That's right. So, these people will say future economic benefits will come. That is why I'm working, right? Why will I pay somebody 20 lakhs if they don't give me any future economic benefits? बात समझ रहे हो? Today I'm working on the technology that is having implications 5 years down the line. And I will get orders from the 6th or 7th year. But I'm getting the technology ready for that. So now the question is, how am I going to treat the cost, that 20 lakhs which I'm paying? Ind AS 38 you people have studied. Usme you studied that criteria for recognizing an intangible asset, internally generated intangible assets. पढ़ा था ना आपने? Technical
Yes, sir.
feasibility, intent of the entity to cover, to complete the project. Okay, ये 6-7 conditions थे, right? Cost can be measured reliably. You remember these?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
So those 6 to 7 conditions, if they are fulfilled, then and only then can you recognize it as an intangible asset. Only then you can recognize it as an intangible asset. Otherwise, it will not be an intangible asset. Is it okay? Yes. So my point is, even if I am unable to categorize it as an intangible asset, more likely than not, I will be unavailable. Because what happens is, currently, I am working on a research phase. It is a research phase. You would have studied in Ind AS 38. Development is the application of research findings, right? But research phase I do not know whether my product will be a success or not. And therefore, all the costs that I incur in my research phase has to be mandatorily expensed. Has to be mandatorily expensed. Are you able to understand? And because these costs have to be mandatorily expensed, my whole point is that we need to put these particular items, we need to put these particular items in the P&L. But when they come in the P&L, every month we have a hit of 20 lakhs. Every month 20 lakhs ka hit hai, matlab end of the year I will have a 2.5 crore ka expense sitting in my P&L for which I have no income. And this is a burden on the company. But is this function integral to the business? Answer is yes. And because it is integral to the business, even though it does not generate revenue, it can still be considered as an operating segment because there is discrete information available which is reviewed regularly by the CODM. So we saw the first criteria of identifying an operating segment. Kya criteria tha? Does it generate revenue? If answer to that is no, it is not an operating segment. But here it says that if a function is integral to business, then it does become an operating segment. It does become an operating segment.
Sir,
Yes.
can you repeat that point?
कौन सा वाला?
सर ये जो लास्ट आपने रिपीट किया क्योंकि मेरे यहाँ पे नेटवर्क का इशू था तो
Okay.
बार बार कट के आवाज आ रही
So
थी।
basically what happens is these particular items, segments, they do not generate revenue. D&D does not generate revenue. Acha, many organizations have training centers. You go to any big accounting firm, they have a separate training team only. They will give them updates. They have a software. They have learning management systems. They have a team of professionals whose only job is to give them updates, train them, teach them, give them templates, train them, teach them, give them templates, and look into the issues. That's it. But this team does not generate any external revenues. But can I function without such a team? Answer is no, because their provision of templates, provision of updates, teaching them the updates, that is critical for the organization's operations. And therefore, this particular operating segment, though it does not generate revenue, will be considered as an operating segment if it is regularly reviewed by the CODM. Otherwise, ये condition तो है ही है कि I need to generate revenue. But as an exception, if there is a function which is discrete, which is integral, we will still continue to treat it as a separate identifiable operating segment, even though it does not generate revenue. Okay? Now, coming to discontinued operations, is it an operating segment? If it continues to engage in business activities, whose operating results are reviewed by the CODM and there is discrete information available, then it would meet the definition of an operating segment. Are we okay? Monica, did you follow?
Yes, sir.
About others, Pooja, Stephen, Jeannie, Nisha, Mamta, Niranjan, Hemant, Erin.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that takes care of this. And now we come on to the next one. That is the aggregation criteria. हम लोग क्या करेंगे? Step 2 we will complete in totality, and then we will take a short break and then complete the remaining 2 steps. Okay. Disclosures ज्यादा कुछ है नहीं, मतलब it's only disclosure of data. तो उसमें मुझे कुछ पढ़ाना नहीं है. ओके. So step 4 जो है मैं 1 मिनट में खत्म कर दूंगा, बोलूंगा ये डिस्क्लोजर है, यही देना है, दे दो, बस. दैट्स इट. ओके. But step 2 and step 3, identifying operating segments and identifying reportable segments. These 2 are very critical. Step 3, disclosure, disclose whatever is there. So step 4 is very simple. 2 and 3 are critical. That's why I'm taking time. Acha. Aggregation of operating segments. Is aggregation consistent with core principles of Ind AS 108? If the answer is yes, then do the segments have similar economic characteristics? If it is yes, are the segments similar in each of the following respects? Nature of products and services, nature of production processes, type or class of customers for their products and services, methods used to distribute their products or provide services, and nature of regulatory environments. If these answers are similar and answer is yes, then what you can do is you can aggregate the multiple segments. You can aggregate the multiple segments. Okay. So, ठीक है. So what happens is many times you will be having multiple segments. That will be an overload on the financial statements. So to reduce the burden, you may opt for aggregation of the segments, but aggregation, you need to look at these particular flow. You need to look at this particular flow. You can aggregate only those segments which are similar. Similar in products, services, production processes, type or class of customers, methods used to distribute their products, and nature of regulatory environment. Okay. All right. Now, let us move on to the next one. XY Limited has operations in France, Italy, Germany, UK, and India. It wishes to apply aggregation criteria on a geographical basis. How will the aggregation criteria apply? How will the aggregation criteria be applied? So what it can do is France, Italy, Germany, all of these, you can say that they fall under the European Union. So I can do an aggregation. UK, Brexit ho gaya na? At least that was the last update I had. So UK is supposed to not be a part of the European Union. So UK is separate and India is separate. Okay. So aggregation criteria can be done based on this particular mechanism. Are we okay? Able to understand? Yes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now,
Excuse me, can you please explain it again?
see, operations are in France, Italy, Germany, UK, and India. What the entity wants to do is it wants to combine the segments. It does not want to present 5 different segments. So generally France, Italy, Germany, these 3 countries are falling in the same economic regime, जिसको हम लोग बोलते हैं European Union. Okay, currencies are same, policies are also in line with each other. Okay, they facilitate cross-border trade, movement of people, jobs, etc. So we can aggregate France, Italy, and Germany.
Yes.
Brexit हो गया. Brexit didn't exited from the European Union, so UK is now independent. I'm not aware of the status, but जहां तक मुझे याद है, Brexit was a major issue in Britain. So UK is separate and India is separate. So I cannot aggregate all into one. At the most, I can aggregate into 3 various segments.
Yes, sir.
European Union, UK, and India. Okay, so that takes care of this. Coming to the next one. X is engaged in the business of manufacturing and selling papers. Varieties of paper like adhesive paper, anti-rust, antique, art paper, etc. are manufactured and sold by X. Should X classify these papers into different segments? No.
No answer.
Uh-huh.
No, no, sir. So, all of our papers, they manufacture in the same process.
आप एग्जाम के बाद क्या बनने वाले हो? ये केबीसी नहीं चल रहा है कि यस और नो में जवाब देना है. ओके, सोच के जवाब दो. शुड एक्स क्लासिफाई? व्हेन दीज क्वेश्चंस कम, दीज आर ट्रिक क्वेश्चंस. ओके, you answer yes, a diplomatic answer is there for no. You answer no, a diplomatic answer is there for yes. तो आप diplomatically answer क्या दोगे? The entity has to evaluate the customer, the manufacturing process, the method of distribution. All these have to be evaluated, and based on the outcome of that evaluation, the entity can take a decision on whether they need to be categorized as a separate segments or not. If it is common, then there is no need to create a different segment, and all of them can be aggregated into one. आप एक बात याद कर लो, बिठा दो दिमाग में. You are going to be a professional. A professional should have a broad outlook. Okay, that is what sets you apart from the rest of the public. So there will always be multiple perspectives. Bring those perspectives in your answer. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
that is important. Okay.
ചാർലി സന്തോഷ് സമത ഇവരുടെ പെണ്ണുപിള്ളമാരാ മിസ്സസ് സമത പിന്നെ
What, Stephen?
സാലി.
Hello.
Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir.
Okay, all right. So now coming to illustration 6. Yeah. So should it classify? You look at all the factors and then take a decision. See, I cannot expect you to know the manufacturing process of adhesive paper, anti-rust paper, and bhai mujhe hi nahi pata. I also don't know. For whatever reasons, I'm not even sure if the examiner knows. Examiner wants to test you not on your knowledge of the manufacturing process. Examiner wants to test you on these criteria. That is why the question is framed. So as long as he sees these things mentioned somewhere in your answer, वो आपको marks दे देगा. He is not concerned with yes or no. Why? That decision is something you leave it to the business. Okay, but you as a finance professional should know that aggregation is possible if they are similar in these categories. If they are not similar, aggregation is not possible. So बस आप answer में उतना ही बताओ. Okay, so that is done. Coming to the next one. T Limited is engaged in the transport sector. बड़ा question है. Running a fleet of buses at different routes. T has identified 3 operating segments. Segment 1, local route. Segment 2, intercity. Segment 3, contract hiring. The characteristics of each segment are as under. The local transport authority awards the contracts to ply the buses at different routes for passengers. This is the local route. These contracts are awarded following a competitive tender process. The ticket price paid by passengers are controlled by the local transport authority. T Limited would charge the local transport authority on a per kilometer basis. Okay. Segment T, intercity. T Limited operates buses from one city to another. Prices are set by T Limited itself on the basis of services provided. Deluxe, luxury or superior. Achha, segment 1 mein, who was controlling the prices? Who was controlling the prices?
Authority.
The local authority.
Local.
T had no say on the pricing. Segment 2 में T Limited is the entity that is controlling the prices depending on the offering. Segment 3, T Limited also leases buses to schools under a long-term arrangement, contract hiring. Okay. While segment 1 has been showing a significant decline in profitability, yani wo local wala na, local route, it is showing a decline in profitability. Segment 2 is performing well in respect of higher revenues and improved margins. The management of the company is not sure why is the segment information relevant for users when they should only be concerned about the returns from the overall business. They would like to aggregate segment 1 and segment 2. That means local and intercity route. They want to aggregate it for reporting under operating segments. The question is whether it is appropriate to aggregate segments 1 and 2 with reference to Ind AS 108 and discuss whether disclosure of segment information is relevant to an investor's appraisal of financial statements. Don't jump to the answer. We will see how the institute has answered, because all of us know the basic principles. So whether it is appropriate to aggregate, immediately we will say no. But you need to list those criteria. You need to list those criteria. So let us just look at how the solution is worded by the institute. It is a very comprehensive question. So what they have said is, for the aggregation, you need to look at these criteria. I have given this criteria in my discussion also. While products and services are similar, the customers are different. In segment 1, pricing is in the hands of the local authority. In the intercity segment, it is the customer who determines whether a bus route is economically viable by choosing whether or not to buy the tickets. T Limited sells the ticket prices and will be affected by customer behavior or feedback. T is exposed to passenger revenue risk because if it chooses to ply a deluxe bus, passengers may not be there for the deluxe bus, in which case you are running a loss-making enterprise. Okay. Exposed to passenger revenue risk as it sets prices which customer may or may not choose to pay. Operating segment provides information that makes the financial statements more useful to investors. They consider the returns likely to make on their investments. This requires assessment of amount, timing, and uncertainty of the future cash flows of T Limited, as well as the stewardship of the resources. Inappropriately aggregating segments reduces the usefulness of segment disclosures. Okay, now why would they want to disclose segment 1 and 2 together? Obvious सी बात है. Segment 1 profit is down, segment 2 profit is high. So दोनों मिला के disclose करोगे, there will be stability. Able to follow? Yes, that is the intention. They want to disclose 1 and 2 together. They don't want to expose the fact that they are making one loss. They don't want to, they are hiding that loss on the cover of the profitability. They are hiding that loss on the cover of profit. Because loss दिखा दिया, investors will start asking questions. भाई अगर लॉस कर ही रहे हो तो why are you running that local authority के लिए जो भी local routes क्यों apply कर रहे हो? छोड़ दो, don't fly on the local routes. Will save the money. Okay. खाली भी बैठो. Okay. You even sit idle. Many times आपने marginal costing पढ़ा है ना? You have studied marginal costing, right? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So marginal costing में we studied something known as temporary shutdown point. Yes or no? तो कई बार बंद करना better है instead of operating, because by shutting the shop temporarily you will lose lesser money as compared to carrying on the operations, because with operations your overheads also will start to multiply. Your overheads also will start to multiply. Okay, so now coming back, inappropriately aggregating segments reduces the usefulness of disclosures. Okay. In T Limited's case, if the segments are aggregated, the increased profits in 2 will hide the decreased profits in segment 1. However, the fact that profits have sharply declined would be of interest to investors, as it may suggest that future cash flows from this segment are at risk. It is not mandatory to aggregate segments. An entity, if it desires, can disclose separately information about segments that meet all the criteria. However, with regard to upper limit on number of segments to be reported, the entity should consider whether a practical limit has been reached. Okay. So you saw the way the answer is worded. Yes, you may not write such a huge answer, but at least this you should mention. You should mention your conclusions on segment 1 and segment 2, and you should come out with this fact that you have to hide. The intent is to hide, whereas investors would be interested to know the reduced profitability. When you answer all these criteria, you will definitely get the marks that you would rightfully deserve. Okay. So that takes care of illustration 7. Okay. All right. Next. Okay. So we take a break now. We shall resume by 9:05. Okay. Step 3, determination of reportable segments. Okay. So we take a break now and then let us continue. Okay. Yes. So coming to the operating segments and reportable segments, what is the distinction between the two? So here what the standard does is it tries to balance materiality with excessive information. Okay. See, you may be having hundreds of operating segments. CODM may have all the time in the world to view all the 100 segments. Okay. Point is, do I need to give the disclosures of each of those segments and make your annual report, which is already overloaded, even more overloaded? So there the standard comes in and says, we will give certain criteria. We will give certain criteria. That criteria will be the basis for determining whether an operating segment will be a reportable segment. Okay. So if it is a reportable segment, give the disclosure. Otherwise, do not report separately anything about that operating segment. So now let us look at the basic quantitative thresholds. Whether the reported revenue, both internal and external, of an operating segment is 10% or more of the combined revenue of all operating segments. So internal revenues, external revenues, add both of them and then look at each segment's revenue. If it is 10% or more, then yes, report separately information about the operating segment. If answer to that is no, then we look at the profitability. Whether absolute amount of reported profit or loss is 10% or more of the greater in absolute amount of combined profit of all operating segments that did not report a loss and the combined reported loss of all operating segments that reported a loss. अच्छा, क्या मतलब है इसका? Words look complicated, but it's not. Okay, suppose I have 6 segments, A, B, C, D, E, F. A is profitable, B is profitable, D is profitable, E is profitable, C and F are loss-making. Now, when I have to do a profitability assessment of 10%, I cannot aggregate all of them and then decide the profitability of 10%. What the standard says is A, B, D, E. Look at the total profit of this. Look at the total profit. And if the profit of A, B, D, and E is 10% or more, then it will become a reportable segment. Look at C and F. Look at the total loss of this. And then look at C's loss and F's loss. If C's loss and F's loss is 10% or more of all the operating segments that made a loss, then it will become a reportable segment. आप netting off नहीं कर सकते for the purposes of assessing the criteria. If you net off, my materiality level will go even further down. Then what you will end up saying is probably there is no reportable segment based on the losses, based on the profitability. So standard did not want you to go into that level of materiality. It is saying take all segments which made a profit, all segments which made a loss separately, don't net off, and then assess the 10% criteria of the segments to the respective categories where they fall into. Did you follow? Yes. Did you understand this? Everyone, Nisha, Monica, Jeannie, Pooja, did you understand?
अरे लॉस वाले में भी लॉस वाले का टोटल अपने को कंसीडर करना है या फिर इंडिविजुअल?
सिर्फ आप C और F का टोटल लॉस कंसिडर करोगे.
ओके, टोटल लॉस.
Okay, total loss.
Yes.
And then you will see if C is making 10% or more, F is making 10% or more.
Okay.
And then you will decide whether it becomes, hey, we have examples. I will do the examples for you. Okay. All
Yes,
right.
clear.
Whether assets are 10% or more of combined assets of all operating segments. This is one more criteria. And then Last one is management discretion. Whether management believes that the segment information would be useful to the users of financial statements. So this is particularly, suppose they are entering into a new segment. Segment chota hai, but they believe that it has the potential to grow. So then they will also report that. Or yeah, so basically that would be one of the scenarios where they would want to report even if it is not breaching the 10% criteria. No. If all these questions are no, then do not report information separately about an operating segment. So 10% revenue criteria, internal plus external both. 10% absolute profit or absolute loss criteria is the second condition. 10% segment assets criteria. These are the three criteria for determining the materiality and then to identify whether an operating segment is a reportable segment. Then there are other requirements. Aggregation principle. Entity may combine information about operating segments that do not meet quantitative criteria to produce a reportable segments only if such segments meet the 5 criteria in slide 14 and have similar economic characteristics. आप aggregation तब करोगे जब आप ये criteria meet करोगे. You can aggregate the segments and then do the aggregation principle. Number 1. Number 2. Your total reporting identified reportable segments based on revenue principles, segment assets principles, profitability criteria. Based on all this, you have to cover at least 75% of total external revenue. Okay. If total external revenue reported by operating segments is less than 75%, then you should go on adding additional operating segments even if they do not meet the 10% thresholds until at least 75% of entity's revenue is included. Did you understand this? Yes? Did you understand this? Suppose I have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 7 segments. Out of these 7 segments, my 10% criteria वाले जो segments है, 10% profitability, 10% of total internal external revenue, 10% of segment assets. Based on the 10% criteria, my reportable segments are A, B, and C. So A, B, and C to definitely become reportable. Now, the problem is the external revenues of A plus B plus C is less than 75% of total external revenues. Are we able to understand? Yes, are we able to understand? And because A, B, and C is less than 75%, what the standard tells is look at the remaining. You go on adding more and more reportable segments until you meet the 75% revenue criteria. Until you meet the 75% external revenue criteria. Did you understand? Yes. So A, B, and C के अलावा, let us suppose F plus G together. So A plus B plus C plus F plus G meets the 75% criteria. Then your reportable segments will be A, B, C, F, and G. Sir, F and G do not meet 10%. Agreed. They don't meet 10% criteria. But I am putting them because I have to meet the 75% external revenue criteria. Did you follow? Yes?
Yes, sir.
All right. Monica, Nisha, Pooja, all okay? Stephen?
Yes.
All right. ठीक है. अच्छा, continuity principle. If management judges that an operating segment identified as a reportable segment in the immediately preceding period is of continuing significance, information about that segment shall continue to be reported separately even if it no longer meets the 10% threshold. Previous year, it was reportable. Current year, reportable criteria is not met. So current year, it is non-reportable. तो continuity छूट जाएगा ना, last year था, इस साल नहीं है. So then if you want to maintain the continuity and the management believes it is of continuing significance, then you continue to report it even though it does not meet the 10% criteria or the 75%. Okay. Comparison principle. Now, in this year, I got a reportable segment which was not reportable in the previous year. ये continuity का opposite है. Continuity में क्या था? Last year it was reported. Current year it is not reportable. I continue to report. In the comparison criteria, current year a segment became reportable. Previous year it was not reportable. So, because it was not reported in the previous year, but it is reportable in the current year, to facilitate comparison, आप क्या करोगे? What are you going to do? You will have to restate to facilitate comparison, even if the criteria is not met in the preceding period. Did you understand? Yes? Did you follow?
Yes, sir.
इन दोनों के बीच का डिफरेंस समझ में आ गया ना. कंटिन्यूटी वाज लास्ट ईयर रिपोर्टेबल, current year not reportable, make it reportable to facilitate continuity. Comparison, current year reportable, previous year not reportable, restate previous periods to get the data, unless the information is not available and cost to develop would be high. See, information not available and cost to develop very high is something that is a cost benefit trade-off which will come at every point of leg for the purposes of financial reporting. So when you study your conceptual framework, have you studied conceptual framework?
No, sir.
नहीं ना. तो conceptual framework जब आप पढ़ोगे वहां पे there is one major criteria, that is cost benefit analysis. For every reporting that you have to do, you will have to assess the cost of getting that particular data and how much it is beneficial to me. And that will be one of the basis for taking a call. But you cannot go behind the shadow of cost benefit to avoid all disclosures. Okay. Because it's not proper also, it's not expected also. Okay. All right. Next, 10 segments principle. अच्छा, अभी इतने सारे segments होंगे, you will have so many segments that a practical limit may be placed to the number of reportable segments to prevent excessively detailed segment information. To prevent excessively detailed segment information. Such limit may be placed at 10 if reported segment as per thresholds crosses 10 segments. तो आप 10 तक सीमित रखो. Okay. Management discretion. Sometimes management may believe that a particular segment should be disclosed separately. If that is there, then please report. Practical life में ये दिखता नहीं है. Management will always think opposite. ये क्यों देना है? वो क्यों देना है? इससे काम चलाओ. That is what is the typical nature of business houses. Okay, they always want to I won't say not disclose, but they want to see why do we need to disclose. Okay, that is the typical nature that we have, but this option is there. Okay, next, coming to residual category, information about other business activities operating segments that are not reportable shall be combined and disclosed in all other segments category, separate from other reconciling items in the reconciliations to be prepared. Sources of revenues included in all other segments shall be described. Okay, so that takes care of that part. Okay, all right. Now,
sir.
Yes.
Sir, this previous year there is no comparison, and this year we have criteria.
Yeah.
And how we can restate that one? You are telling that you want to restate the previous one. How we can? The third criteria related residual category.
I'm talking about the you are talking about comparison principle, right?
Yeah, please.
So you want to know how we can restate it?
Yeah, please.
This is only a disclosure, no, Stephen? You are not making any accounting changes. So all you need to do is you need to go back in time, pull out the data pertaining to this segment. See, obviously, when I have a segment data for the current year, it is obvious that you will be able to get this data from the previous year. You are not required to pass any entries. All that you need to do is the criteria that you took to identify this segment in the accounting. So accounting package mein kya hoga? You will have your trial balance. The trial balance will have its entries. So these entries will typically be segment wise or profit center wise. You will be allocating separate profit centers for each of the segments. So in the current period, if a particular segment is coming from a particular profit center, that profit center would have been there in the previous year also. So if that profit center is there in the previous year, all you need to do is take out the information from that profit center and disclose it. You are not required to pass any entries for that. This is only a disclosure standard. Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
So that we call it as a restatement. Okay. That is what is restatement. Because what will happen, there are some intelligent shareholder activists. Okay. They will say that, sir, last year this was not disclosed. This year it is disclosed. So that is why standard said, boss, restate. Option is given there. Okay. Otherwise, these activists will end up saying last year reporting was not correct. So the standard said, mention that you are restating the last year to facilitate comparison. Okay. Fine. So now we come on to the next one. That is, we look, see these questions, I will come back to these later. This will be generally for your homework. Okay. This I will not be attending to separately because there are similar questions which I would prefer to solve. Okay. All right. Now, X has identified the following business components: pharma, FMCG, Ayurveda, and others, total for the entity. Which of the segments would be reportable? All right. Which of the segments would be reportable as per the criteria prescribed in Ind AS 108? Okay. See, this is all simple arithmetic. Okay. So I'm not going to wait. We'll just look at the solutions, then you can understand. So look at the quantitative thresholds. Look at the quantitative thresholds for pharma. For pharma, what is the total revenue external? 97 divided by you will have to take this total. Okay. So 153. 97 by 153. Are you able to understand why 153? Because the 10% revenue criteria is external plus internal put together. Are you able to follow? Yes? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So 97 by 153. FMCG 4 divided by 153. So 4 by 153, 2.61. Ayurveda 3 by 153. So 3 by 153, 1.96. And then others is going to be 49 by 153. So that comes to around 32%. Coming to percentage of segment profits to total assets. Sorry, segment profits to total profits. 20 by 30. This is the total. So 20 by 30, 67%. This will be 2.5 by 30. And last is going to be 2 by 30. 6.67. Others 5.5 by 30. 5.5 by 30. Then percentage of segment assets to total assets. 55 by 90. 61. Then 25 by 90. 28. Then we are having 4 by 90. Then we are having 6 by 90. 6 by 90. Is it okay? Did you understand the overall categorizations? So now, pharma segment, is it crossing 10% of sales? Yes. So it would become reportable even with this, but it is crossing 10% of profits, 10% of asset also. So pharma will definitely be a reportable segment. Next, FMCG. FMCG. Is it passing the revenue test? Answer is no. Is it passing the profitability test? Answer is no. Is it passing the total asset test? Answer is yes. So FMCG also will become reportable. Ayurveda, is it passing the sales test? Answer is no. Is it passing profit test? Answer is no. Is it passing the total assets test? Answer is no. So it is not separately classifiable. It is not separately reportable. Okay. So pharma would be separately reportable. FMCG would be separately reportable. And then you have others including Ayurveda. Did you understand? Yes?
Yes, sir.
All right. So that takes care of this. Okay. All right. An entity has branches in different parts of the country, catering to different customers and selling local made products. A product of one region is not sold in any other region. No region or product contributes more than 5% to total revenue of the entity. How many segments are reportable? बताइए. Help me. सब चुप बैठ गए, सो गए. Not able to decide. Okay. See, one thing is sure. Are these segments individually meeting any of the criteria? Assets ka data is not given. Profitability data is not given. They have only given the data of revenue. Each of them is meeting, let us say, 5% revenue max. So at the most, I have to cover 75%. So 75% divided by 5%, 15 segments. Question is not having the data for the other criteria. So based on the available criteria, at least 15 segments will be reportable, assuming that each of these segments have the 5% revenue. Did you understand?
Yes, sir.
और कोई option भी तो नहीं है. Nothing else is there as an option. So based on the given data, it is 15. Okay. All right. Next. X has identified 4 operating segments for which the revenue data is as under. You have external revenue, internal revenue, total. So I leave this for homework. ये तो आप कर ही सकते हो. Okay. Segment C is a new business unit and management expects this segment to make a significant contribution to external revenues in the coming years. Which of the above segments would be reportable under the criteria identified in Ind AS 108? So that is something you will have to decide. Is it okay? Yes. So can you do this for homework?
Yes.
You just have to take 30 by 1 crore, 6.5 by 1 crore, 9.5 by 1 crore, and 54 by 1 crore. That's it. You will arrive at your answer. Okay. All right. Next. This is Okay. This is relating to profitability. Okay. What we just now saw relating to profitability. This is based on that. So now ABC Limited has 5 operating segments, namely A, B, C, D, and E. The profit or loss for each of the segments are as under. A 780, B 1500, C minus 2300, D 4500, E 6000. So what I will do is, based on the quantitative thresholds, which of the above would be considered as reportable segments? Don't do 780 by 1480. That's not right. What I will do is, A, what are the profit making segments? 1, 2, 3. So A, B, E. Total profit is how much? 780 plus 1500. So this comes to 2280 plus 6000. So 8280. Then I am having C and D. C and D put together is 4500. 4500. So now A plus B plus E, 8280. So A is 780 by 8280. So this comes to 9.4%. B is 1500 by 8280, 18.12%. And E is 6000 by 8280. So that comes to 72.46%. Is it okay? Yes. C plus D. C is 2300 divided by 4500, 51%. And then D is how much? 1 minute. Sorry. C plus D, 2300, 4500, 6800. So now 2300 by 6000. Yes. Wait a minute. Let us see the conditions. Okay. I'm sorry. This is not going to be like this. We misread it. Okay. My mistake. See, what it says is whether absolute amount of reported profit or loss is 10% or more of the greater in absolute amount of combined profit and combined loss. So in this case, you can check. Yeah. See, combined profit is 8280. Combined loss is 6800. So greater of the two is 8280 in absolute terms. So 8280 will be my benchmark number for determining the 10% profitability. It's not C and F separately as I showed in the earlier case. That's my bad. It should be greater of the two. So my total reported profit is 8280. Total reported loss is 6800 in absolute terms. Greater of the two is 8280. And therefore, C and D will be compared as a percentage of 8280. So 2300 divided by 8280. This comes to 28%. Did you follow? Yes. And finally,
Yes.
4500 divided by 8280. So this comes to 54%. Did everyone understand this?
Yes,
सर
sir.
डायरेक्ट 8280 का 10% निकाल के सबको एक साथ निकालना जरूरी है कितना क्या क्या परसेंट किसका आ रहा है
जरूरी नहीं है।
828
8280 का 10% is 82.8. So anything above 82.1 minute.
828 सॉरी
828. So 828 से नीचे जो भी है आप उसको छोड़ सकते हो. That is, you leave A. Rest all become reportable. Okay, B, C,
Okay,
D,
sir.
and okay, you can do it that way. No problem. Nisha, you were not Nisha. Ginny, you were saying something?
No, sir, I was saying it's clear.
अच्छा, it's clear. अच्छा, मोनिका समझ में आ गया, पूजा समझ में आ गया, स्टीफन did you follow, ममता did you follow, हेमंत did you follow?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. All right, so that is about question 4. Okay, all right, next. ठीक है. Now let us look at this question. Okay, and then I leave this for homework. Okay, all right. Now, Abhijit has 8 segments, information of which is given as under segment revenue, external sales, inter-segment sales, total revenue, segment result, profit or loss, segment assets. Identify which of the above constitute reportable segments if you were informed that A, B, C, and E were the reported segments in the last financial year. Okay. So now, revenue. This is a nice question. Okay. Now, if we look at question 6. Acha. The 10% criteria of revenue is based on what? External revenue, internal revenue, or both?
Sir, both.
Both. So, ठीक है, we write down A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. बाप रे. E, F, G, H. Okay. So total revenue is how much? 200, 630. 200, 630, 90, 30, 30, 90, 30, 30, 150, 70. 150, 70. Total of this is how much? 1200. Correct? This total is 1200. Any doubt so far?
No.
So, based on this, what becomes your reportable? It's 10%. So 1200 ka 10% comes to how much? 120. So anything above 120 becomes reportable. So 200 A becomes reportable. 630 becomes reportable. Rest are all not reportable. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. No doubts here. ये हो गया on the basis of revenue. Next, we come on the basis of segment results. So what are my profit making segments? A, C, E, G,
Loss
H.
is higher than the profit. 200 is loss or 80 is
Loss in absolute terms is equal to 180 plus 10 plus 10. So that gives you 200. Profit in absolute terms is 10 plus 30, 40, 30, 70, 80. Okay. 10, 30, 16, 10, 14, 10, 30. 60, 10, 10. So that is 80. So obviously greater of these two, greater is equal to 200. Okay. So now A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. तो उस हिसाब से 10, 180, 10, 180, 30 minus 10, 16, 30 minus 10, 16, minus 10, 10, 40. 10% in absolute terms is 20, correct? So therefore, reportable. I will look at absolute terms. I will look at absolute terms. So in absolute terms, my reportable segments should be 20 and above. So 180 in absolute terms is 120, is greater than 20. So B is reportable. C is reportable. All right. Rest, everything is below 20, right? So therefore, this is not reportable. Any doubt so far? Yes?
No, sir.
Assets. Now we talk about assets. What is the total value of your assets? 300 into 10%, 30. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. So assets 45, 141, 141, 15, 33, 9, 9, 15, 15, 27. Okay. So what is your reportable segment? Greater than 30, 45, 141, 33. Yes. All right. Okay. So therefore, if I look at my reportable segments, what all is coming out of it?
A, B, C, D.
B, C, D. A,
D.
B, C, D. Yes. A, B, C, and is everybody okay till now? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Achha. Now, total external revenue is equal to how much? 800. Correct? Total external revenue of above segments is equal to 0, 5, 10, 30, 20. 0, 5, 10.
सर ऊपर आपने 80 लिखा है 800 की जगह.
अच्छा अच्छा 510, 30, 20. So this comes to how much? 510 plus 30, 540 plus 20, 560.
560.
Therefore, percentage of
70%.
external revenue 560 by 800 is equal to 70%, which is less than 75%. So have I met the 75% external revenue criteria? Answer is no. So I still need to add further segments. So what have they given? Last year, E was also a reportable segment. So if E was a reportable segment, do I have to make E a reportable segment in the current period? Bolo. Yes. Last year, E was a reportable segment. Yes. This year is E reportable A, B, C, and D. technically speaking, E is not reportable based on the criteria. But will the reader be benefited if I make E as a reportable segment? Bolo yaar.
Yes, sir, if management considers is necessary.
हमारे management नहीं, if you disclose E,
Okay, yes, sir, yes, sir.
continuity will be facilitated, na?
Yes,
Last
yes,
year का this
continuity.
year continuity will be facilitated.
Yes, sir.
Add E as a segment to facilitate continuity. So 800 into 75% is 600. Therefore, reported segments external revenue is equal to 0 plus 510 plus 30 plus 20 plus E is another 30, right? E is another 30. So 510, 540, 560, 590. And then you are still below 600. So you can select anything out of F, G, and H. So we can select F. Additionally, select F to meet 75% revenue criteria. Therefore, reportable segments is equal to A, B, C, D, E, and F. Is it okay? Yes. Did everybody understand?
Yes, sir.
Monica, Jeannie,
Yes, sir.
Hemant?
सर
Yes.
जैसे हमने इस बार ई को भी रिपोर्टिंग सेगमेंट को कंटिन्यू करने के लिए कंसिडर किया, वैसे अगर नेक्स्ट ईयर भी अगर ये क्राइटेरिया फुलफिल नहीं करता है, बट फॉर द सेक ऑफ कंटिन्यूटी वी कैन अगेन टेक दैट
I
सेगमेंट.
was expecting this question. ऐसे करेंगे तो कंटिन्यूटी कभी खत्म ही नहीं होगी, राइट?
यस
बिकॉज इस साल कंटिन्यूटी के तौर पे मैंने रखा. नेक्स्ट ईयर दिस इज नॉट रिपोर्टेबल फॉर द प्रीवियस ईयर. We can stop it. We can stop it. In fact, if you look at the way the standards are worded, okay, other requirements, you can maintain the continuity provided what the wordings are. If management judges that an operating segment identified as a reportable segment is of continuing significance. So even now, if the management is of the opinion that E can be avoided by keeping it reported, koi significant cheese we are not achieving, I can say I will not disclose anything pertaining to E. Continuity is not important because today E is not a significant segment. F becomes a significant segment. So in that case, even if you stick to A, B, C, D, and F, I think you are meeting the 600 crores 75% criteria. Yes or no?
यस
Yes,
सर.
sir.
So you can say that assuming E not to be significant, we are bypassing the continuity principle. Instead, we will report F and close the matter. So you will then report only 5 instead of 6 segments. Are you okay?
यस
Yeah.
सर.
So that takes care of this question. Okay. All right. This is done. Next. This one I leave it to you for homework. Same question. Now, what is there different? External sales, inter-segment sales, segment result, segment assets. Nothing new. Which of these out of A to H would be considered as reportable segments? Okay. Let me see. RTPs. Second, RTPs. May 22.
Sir?
Yes.
Today you have not uploaded the notes on the boss portal.
कल डाला था, मे बी लेट से डाला है, शायद आपने देखा नहीं होगा. आई डिड इट
नहीं,
लेट.
अभी मैंने चेक किया एक्चुअली, तो वो शो नहीं कर रहा इसीलिए.
Okay, fine. I will check. I will check. I will check. Okay. All right. Fine. ठीक है. Now this is question 9, right? Okay. So question 9 कर देते हैं आपके लिए. May 22 ही है ना? RTP May 2022. Something is not right. Not question 17 it is. This is question 17, not 9. Okay. All right. Okay. Same way, segment revenue, they have calculated the percentages. You can choose to do that. Okay, so A and B become reportable. Segment result, absolute terms, 100 is greater. So B and C become reportable. Segment assets, A, B, and D become reportable. So A, B, C, and D. They are meeting only 69%. You need 75%. So in the above scenario, additional operating segments need to be identified as reportable segments till the 75% test is fulfilled. They have stuck here. You can say, I can choose any of the remaining segments, E, F, and G. You just see whether it meets the criteria and proceed with that. Is it okay? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that is this question. All right. Now, what am I going to disclose? Last step. Information, factors used to identify reportable segments, judgments made in applying aggregation criteria, and types of products and services from which each reportable segment derives its revenues. Then I will disclose profit or loss for each reportable segment, measure of assets and liabilities for each reportable segment. Measurement basis, this is important. You may use a measure different from that used in financial statements to measure an operating segment's profit or loss, segment assets or liabilities. See, many times what happens, the way we present the data to the management is quite different from what happens in financial reporting. Like financial reporting, you have seen your format of the P&L, right? In the format of the P&L, what do we have? Revenue from operations, total income. Revenue from operations, other income to give you total income. Below total income in the P&L, you will have cost of goods, cost of materials consumed, cost of goods sold for traded items, changes in inventory, employee benefit cost, and below employee benefit cost, you will have other expenses, depreciation and amortization, financial costs, total costs to give you net profit before tax, tax expense, current tax, deferred tax to give you net profit after tax. यही format है अपना? Yes? बोलो यार, this is my format. But what happens when you discuss these results with the management? The way you view the profitability will be entirely different. For instance, the management will want to evaluate sales. They are not concerned with other income. So sales minus material cost minus direct labor cost to give you contribution. Contribution, say you remove your other indirect labor and then you remove other operating expenses to arrive at EBITDA. After EBITDA, you will be having depreciation, finance cost to arrive at net profit before tax. Then you eliminate the tax expense. So your CODM may be interested in metrics like gross profit margin, may be interested in metrics like contribution margin, will definitely be interested in EBITDA margins, because till EBITDA, the COO is responsible. That is what the COO and the operations team delivers. Below EBITDA, they don't have any control. Depreciation is time-based, and finance cost, well, he says it's not my job. Okay, you have to give me the funds, he tells the CFO. So it is your measure. The lower cost you can get the funds is a measure of the efficiency of the finance department. It's not a concern for the operations team. So when that is the situation, the metrics that you use is entirely different. So what will be the basis for giving the data? The basis for giving the data will be based on how the CODM would want to view. Are you able to understand? See, my whole point is I have to present that view to the reader in the way the CODM wants to view the results. And that is why we will even bypass a metric system. For instance, we are having let us take, for example, a business where financial reporting, we measure the inventory using FIFO or weighted average. But for the purpose of analysis, they would prefer to follow last in, first out method. Is last in, first out method allowed under Ind AS 2? Answer is no. But can they do it for their business purposes? Answer is yes. So what am I going to present in the financials in segment reporting? You will present inventory valuation impacts based on LIFO and not based on FIFO or weighted average. Sir, the difference, well, you will have to reconcile the difference with the entity's reported numbers. That work is ours as part of the finance team. Okay. So reconciliation, you will reconcile segment information to the entity amount, segment revenue, result, assets, liabilities, and material information if needed. Disclosures, if provided to CODM, disclosures revenues from external customers and inter-segment revenues, interest revenue and expense, depreciation, amortization, interest in associates, joint ventures, income tax expense, non-cash items other than depreciation and amortization. Inter-segment transactions, basis of accounting and allocation of common expenses, incomes to be made on a reasonable basis. Geographical areas, revenue from external customers attributed to the entity's country of domicile and attributed to foreign countries. Non-current assets located in domiciled country as well as foreign countries. If revenue from single customer is greater than 10%, entity shall disclose that fact. We need to disclose. Disclose total from the customer and identity of segment reporting revenue. Name of the customer need not be disclosed. Okay. All right. So I will leave this for homework. Okay. Very easy questions. Okay. In fact, one of it I have already disclosed. Following items need to be excluded. Gain on sale of investments, dividend and interest income, deferred tax, loss on sale of investments, interest expenses, allocated head office expenses, tax expenses, investments, head office assets, tax assets, provision for tax and head office liabilities. Very simple. Why we don't have to disclose this? Because these have no bearing on the operations, or these are not relevant for the chief operating decision maker. Okay. All right. Now, if an entity changes the structure of its organization such that the composition of reportable segments to change, that causes the reportable segments to change, corresponding information for earlier periods should be restated. Corresponding information for earlier period should be restated. The determination of whether the information is not available and the cost to develop would be excessive to be made for each individual item of disclosure. Following a change in composition of its reportable segments, entity should disclose whether it has restated the corresponding items of segment information for earlier periods. results. Okay, so fairly common sense, right? Acha. And then what I want you to do is you will be trying this disclosure related question as homework. You have revenues, you have GST, you have assets, liabilities, other operating income, then unallocated income, interest and bank charges, interest expenses, okay, depreciation, capital expenditure, and revenue. Based on the above, how would you disclose the information? So it's only a disclosure question. Even if I do this question, what I would have done is I would have given you the data based on this question only I will use as the basis for the data. I will only be presenting it in a particular manner. That's it. Okay. So my advice, please try this question by yourself for homework. External is given, quoting others and total. So you can work it out and arrive at the results. Is it okay? Can you try this for homework?
Yes, sir.
Please try it. Okay. I mean, value add ke taur pe there is very little I see myself adding a value. Okay, because it's just plugging in the information. But please do it because this has come in your examination. Okay. Please do it because this has come in your examination for 10 marks. And in May 2023, it has come for 16 marks. Okay. So that is why it's very important. So please try for it. Okay. All right. So with that, I think we are fairly through with the standard. There is nothing much that I need to be adding on to this. Okay. So we have gone through the core principles. What is there in Ind AS 108? A 4-step process identifying the CODM, operating segments, reportable segments, and finally making the disclosures. Okay. So with that, yes, we are done with Ind AS 108. Anybody has any doubts?
सर
बताइए।
वो मुझे 108 में नहीं बट 33 में एक डाउट था। एक क्वेश्चन था सिंपल सा कि जो हमने इक्विटी और कंपोनेंट का वैल्यू निकाला था, जिसमें हमने इंटरेस्ट निकाला था बाद में, और
Yes,
इंटरेस्ट पोर्शन को हमने अलग कर दिया था और इक्विटी पोर्शन को हमने अलग कर
yes,
दिया था।
yes,
तो वो जो इक्विटी पोर्शन निकला है
yes.
उसको हमें बेसिक ईपीएस और डायल्यूटेड ईपीएस में कंसीडर करना है?
नहीं, नहीं करना है।
नहीं
Because
करना है।
नहीं करना है because that is equity component that has nothing to do with your shares. Okay. आप
ओके
उसको शेयर्स के तौर पे आप उसको तोल नहीं सकते because that is not that is effectively out of your purview. वो चला गया, वो जाके बैठेगा आपका इक्विटी में. That's it. Okay. If suppose
एक्चुअली सर सेम क्वेश्चन 6 नंबर का क्वेश्चन था और हमने किया था तो हम उसमें उसको इंक्लूड नहीं कर रखा था, बट जो कन्वर्ट होके जो शेयर्स आ गए थे उनको तो डाइल्यूशन में इंक्लूड कर रखा था।
yes, the shares which you will be converting, जितने आपको shares मिलेंगे, that you will include for dilution. But the value, the component equity value जो हम निकालते हैं ना, that balancing figure equity, आप वही वाला question बोल रहे हो ना? Let me open that for you. I think
क्वेश्चन
question
लास्ट
14 or question 16. 1 minute. Let me open. Ind AS 33. Study module का question है क्या?
यस सर, यस सर, लास्ट क्वेश्चन है 6 नंबर क्वेश्चन।
6 number. Test your knowledge का क्या?
यस सर।
अच्छा. Okay. Let me check. अच्छा, ये वाला CAB लिमिटेड.
यस सर, यहाँ 10 करोड़ से इंक्लूड किया डाइल्यूशन के लिए, बट जो हम जो इक्विटी कंपोनेंट निकाले था 11,000 समथिंग कुछ था, वो इंक्लूड नहीं किया इसने। तो मेरे क्वेश्चन से इतना सा था कि वो इक्विटी कंपोनेंट का कुछ इंक्लूड करना है कि नहीं करना है।
वैल्यू नहीं इंक्लूड करना है, बट डाइल्यूशन के टाइम पे जो शेयर्स मिलेंगे दैट यू विल डेफिनेटली हैव टू इंक्लूड. ओके. डिड यू
ओके सर। यस सर।
डाइल्यूशन के टाइम पे इंटरेस्ट का जो भी इम्प्लीकेशन होगा दैट यू विल कंसिडर. Okay, that you will definitely consider. Okay, because that is how you will have to do it. That's why I said these questions, if you have an idea of financial instruments, please go ahead and try. But if you don't have, once you get an idea there, you can come and try because this
सर
is
मैं जस्ट एक बार टिक मार्क करके कंप्लीट करना चाह रही थी इसलिए कर लिया, बाकी वापस से रिपीट तब कर लेंगे।
तो आपको टिक करना है. Okay, all right, fine. But anyways, that's okay. That's fine.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, बताइए.
Sir, can you please open the slide number 30?
कौन सा वाला?
Ind AS 33 में ही है.
अच्छा.
एक्चुअली आपने जो Ind AS 33 का फर्स्ट लेक्चर था ना, तब जो होमवर्क दिया था.
Okay, okay. I'll come. Slide number 33.
Yes, sir.
I told I'll be doing some homework. Slide number 33.
33. Oh, sorry, 30. 30.
3030. Okay.
Sir, here यानी ये जो होमवर्क वाला क्वेश्चन है इलेस्ट्रेशन 5,
Okay.
तो इसमें जो बोनस है, बोनस इशू 1 शेयर फॉर 3 शेयर हेल्ड, तो यहाँ पे ऐसा होगा ना कि 3 इक्विटी शेयर पे 1 बोनस शेयर प्रोवाइड किया.
Yes, yes, yes.
तो जब यानी मैंने सॉल्व किया था तो इस तरीके से, बट जब मैंने बुक में यानी जब आंसर अपना टैली किया तो उसमें 4/3 करके कुछ यानी मुझे थोड़ा समझ में नहीं आया.
Okay, fine. What they have done is, I will tell you. You remember we had calculated something as a rights adjustment factor?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, what the institute has done as an alternate is they compute something known as a bonus adjustment factor. So, bonus adjustment factor मतलब क्या हो गया? You had 3 shares. For every 3 shares, you are getting 1.
Yes, sir.
So, at the end, your bonus adjustment factor is 4/3. That means for the number of shares that you are having in your capital structure presently, you will
Yes.
multiply it by 4/3. That's it. Which is nothing but you have 12 lakh shares in your capital structure, 10 plus 2.
Yes, sir.
10 plus 2 के लिए what I and you would have done is 12 lakhs के लिए we would have received 1/3. That
Yes.
is 3 fours are 4 lakh shares, right?
Yes. Yes, sir.
What institute is doing is 12 lakhs into 4/3 directly. So that comes to 3 fours are 12 plus 4, 16 lakhs.
Yes, sir.
आपके पास क्या आ रहा है? 12 plus 4, 16. So ours is a slightly longer method, but उसमें I did not take the bonus adjustment factor into consideration. What institute has done is you can take the bonus adjustment factor and do the working. You'll get the same answer. That's it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Clear.
Okay. All right. Next. Any other questions, doubts? No doubts. बताइए मोनिका, ममता.
No doubts.
No doubts. Okay. Pooja, Jeannie, Stephen.
No doubt, sir. Clear, sir.
Clear? अच्छा ठीक है. Okay, so that's it for today then. Tomorrow we have a new standard again. Yes, that is Ind AS 113. Finally, you are coming to fair value measurement. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we will discuss fair value tomorrow and on Tuesday. Yeah, Stephen, tell me. Yes. So that's it. I think we are fairly done. I don't see from this thing. Devraj, good morning. I don't see any question from you. I can presume that you have no queries. Okay. All right. ठीक है. So we shall then proceed further tomorrow. All right. We shall wind up for today. Done from my side. Okay. All right. ठीक है sir. Session over.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Next day. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.